Hi, I'm Miche Rayment from The Higher Effect. I am a longtime entrepreneur, started my first business when I was 19, and I have been starting and running businesses since. The Higher Effect began in 2015, and you will experience throughout this training some of the system for hiring that I invented over the last 25 years of work as an entrepreneur. This is an interview skills training. For the next 20 to 25 minutes, you'll be hearing tips and techniques and specific components of interviews that you can get better at. Believe me, an interview can always go better. So you'll be hearing about script development, assignments, listening, centering, and getting some juicy little tips on how to run great interviews. Centering yourself is a critical part to doing a great interview. The first thing you're going to want to do is something that the industry calls de-bias. De-biasing is about you really acknowledging that, yes, indeed, you do have biases, and that you are going to do your best to interview the candidate in the most unbiased manner as possible. You're taking in as much information as you can. You are not making a choice in the interview. You are just getting information from them. There is something that we call the bias vortex that often happens in interviewing teams. And that is, they talk to each other between candidates and say things like, oh, you're going to love George, or I'm not so sure about Sally. And the more you listen to those things and who it's coming from, the more you could be biased against or for a particular candidate. So pay attention to that one. You will also want to be completely present when you're interviewing an individual. You intentionally took up the time to schedule this interview with this candidate. So give them the time to show their best to you and take in the information that you can. How do you center yourself and be present? One of the very first things you're going to want to do if you are spinning with to-dos is just write them down, fold the piece of paper, and put it aside. So this is an intentional action that allows you to forget your to-dos, because you can just go back and pick it up when you're done. So the next thing is technology. Don't let technology get in the way. Often I see individuals doing an interview and they'll have their laptop between them and the candidate. And this gives a mood or a feeling that the person that's interviewing is not paying attention or has an extra added distraction from the individual as they try to answer questions. Be radically curious. This allows you to find a space that helps you to get past your biases and get as much information as you possibly can. Design the interview itself. Make sure that the experience is what you want it to be. So when the individual comes to the interview, if it's in person, be ready, say hello, sit down, make sure it's in the right room. And if it's on Zoom, make sure you don't have any distractions in your Teams or Zoom or whatever platform that you decide to use. Those are good centering techniques. So just make sure you're present and paying attention to the individual as they come. Another tip for a great interview is to make sure that you use a script. Often people who are empowered to do interviews don't feel as though they need a script. But having a script allows us to compare apples to apples. if you ask the same questions of candidates, we're in a position where we can make sure that we are following and looking at what our interests are, what we want, what is important to us. But if we don't ask the same questions, then we have difficulty there. We want questions to be relevant. By relevant, I mean know exactly what you want. Know what your culture looks like and know what the skills and the personality traits you're looking for. So that script needs to have not leading questions and very clear you're looking for and asking questions to get them to share information to see if they are the right fit. As you are developing your script, make sure you're paying attention to what kind of interview you're actually conducting. There are a number of different kinds of interviews that we suggest individuals use. That's like the pre-screening interview. And in a pre-screen, you're really only looking for information from the candidate that shows you that they are not a fit. So if they're a maybe, you're moving on. So in a pre-screen, you're only asking the absolutely it matters what they answer, not a longer question. So in a manager interview, where it makes a difference, where you're really focusing on, let's say, interpersonal skills, you're going to ask more questions around those lines. And you're looking to get the maybes further whittled down. So we look at pre-screens, manager interviews, peer interviews, and probably the most sweat-inducing is the panel interview for the candidates. So your scripts should match the condition of the interview. Another component of great interviewing is assignments, having an assignment. What is that? We're really good in this country in giving assignments in the early stages of a hiring process. That's things like write a cover letter or send us a sample blog post. But what we don't do is we don't keep the assignments in the process in those later moments, those later times in a hiring process. And you can put an assignment inside an interview. So you can do things like a mock conversation with someone who is in customer care or potentially going to be in customer care. Assignments are, again, have to be relevant. So what are you looking for and how can you get them to act? A very important and low-hanging fruit that you can pick is have an assignment within an interview and then watch their behavior and see how it matches the way they speak when you ask them a question. Often their behaviors show what they really act like on a job when they may be very conditioned or conditioned themselves to answer questions very well. So here are 4 tips that often help individuals who are at the early stages of learning how to interview. The first is what we call the 90-10 rule. Many people like to, in conversation, add to an answer or help them along. So the 90-10 rule is knowing that in the beginning of the interview, it's about the candidate speaking. So 90% of the time, the candidate will be speaking. So you're working to get them to share more, and you are looking to share less until you get to the part of the interview where they may ask questions and be curious. The next tip is called the awkward pause. And this is awkward for people to learn. So the awkward pause helps you to figure out which one of the candidates, or as candidates prepare, what they haven't prepared for. So you may ask a question, tell me about a time when you were leading a team and something great happened. If they share and it's relatively short, you can just continue to wait for the answer. And sometimes this takes real practice to do. It is awkward to be silent. But what we know is that individuals, when faced with an awkward silence, they will fill it. The next is the silent observer. Add a silent observer. So you can have two people in the room. You can introduce the individual and just say, Sarah is here and she will be observing the interview. You don't have to tell them that they're observing the candidate, but you might. That could also introduce some very good little bit of anxiety to get them to be their true selves rather than their practiced selves. The last tip is acknowledging the non-answer answer. So often what we do when we're interviewing is we'll ask a question and the candidate, either through nerves or intentionally, will answer a totally different question. So what we suggest that you do is kindly bring them back and perhaps simply state the same question over again. And what you'll find is you will get more information. Did the individual not understand the question and didn't ask for clarity? Or did the individual understand the question but felt as though they didn't have a very good answer? So make sure that you face that non-answer answer head on. Listening. Listening is imperative in an interview. We talked about it a little bit with the 90-10, but what we don't know about ourselves is how much better we could be at listening. So I'm going to ask you to take the challenge of listening better. And this challenge involves you to be in a conversation with someone for 1 solid hour. And not once are you going to share something extra than what you've asked the individual. So you're going to be forced in this hour to ask deep, meaningful questions, and then make sure that you're curious enough to follow on with the next question. So this is going to be uncomfortable for some of you, and that's okay. For those of us who have been trained in a lifetime to listen, we always know we can get better at listening. So take on this challenge and see where you can get better at listening for yourself. So that was your little taste of some training around interview skills. We have a couple of different very helpful free things for you because it is Global Entrepreneurship Week. We have an interview skills workshop, which is a self-paced digital format in which you come up with all of these tools, script writing and assignment development, and a few other things that you'll be able to apply for yourself, and you get free coaching to develop those. So you can go to Thinkific and look at the interview skills workshop and put in GEW, all caps, 2023, and you can get this $100 value for nothing. We're excited to have you learn a little bit more about interviewing and how that fits into a really good hiring system. You can also go to Eventbrite for the higher effect. And every Thursday from noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time, we have a clinic. So you can come and ask whatever question you'd like, along with other entrepreneurs, hear what they're asking, and find out more about how you can be valuable to your organization to hire the next best person for your team. Thank you for attending this training, and feel free to share it with your colleagues, and you can get the free clinic on Thursdays, Ask the Expert. You can get the free digital training and get better at interviewing quickly as a team.